Welcome to the Bitcoin Boomer Show. Here's your host, the Bitcoin Boomer himself, Gary Leland.
And welcome to the Bitcoin Boomer Show. I'm your host, Gary Leland, the original Bitcoin Boomer. And like I said, welcome to the show. We have a great show here. We talk about Bitcoin, and then we talk some more about Bitcoin, and then we talk some more about Bitcoin. In other words, all we talk about in this show is Bitcoin. We don't talk about crypto, we talk about Bitcoin. I want to introduce my great producer here, Stephanie. Stephanie, you always do the pre-shows with the guest. What's going on here this time with Will Cole, and what did you want me to make sure and figure out for you?
Well, Will Cole works as head of the product with Zaprite. I know we've had, you said Parker Lewis was the other guest with Zaprite, but I'm curious what they do for businesses, because I have a lot of friends who have businesses, and just what makes them stand apart. I heard that you use them with BitBlock Boom, so just curious, like, what differentiates them in the marketplace for e-commerce like that, Zaprite.
Well, that's a great question, and you're right. I do use Zaprite for BitBlock Boom, and it's a great tool, which I'm sure we will definitely go over before this show ends, but that would be for my conference, bitblockboom.com, that I use Zaprite for. So we will cover that, Stephanie, along with other important Bitcoin topics. But before we get going, I want to make sure everybody knows this show, and I'll say this over and over because I always do want to make sure I get this across, is to teach people about Bitcoin. That's all the goal of this show is to educate you about Bitcoin. I believe, like many other people believe, that there will come a day in the not too distant future that Bitcoin is a heavy part of how we pay for things, how we save money, how we whether it be in digital gold, it's a good way to preserve your wealth. All these things will come to pass, many of us believe. And I am trying to bring guests on the show who can help teach you about Bitcoin, so when that day comes, you're ready and you're knowledgeable about Bitcoin. By watching this show, I believe you're going to learn enough about Bitcoin that if you watch this show on a regular basis, you will become a semi-expert on Bitcoin. And probably you'll orange pill yourself by watching this show, and you'll start buying Bitcoin, because it is the future. It is digital currency, it's digital cash, it's digital gold, however you want to announce it. Now, like I said, today we have Will Cole from Zaprite on the show. We've had Parker Lewis on the show, as Stephanie said before, talking about Zaprite, but this show we'll get into it a little bit more. I personally love Zaprite, and if you're operating a business and you want to accept Bitcoin, Zaprite is the way to go. We'll be right back after this word from our sponsor. And welcome back to the Bitcoin Boomer Show. Today we have got a very exciting show for you. But before we get into the show, I do want to make a statement here. This show is not for boomers only. A lot of people get confused because it's a Bitcoin Boomer Show. And of course, boomers can watch this show and learn, but so can anyone. It's a show about Bitcoin, and I'm a boomer. So that's why it's the Bitcoin Boomer Show, not because it's for boomers, okay? So please, share this show with any friends you might have. They'll learn about Bitcoin in a friendly way, and before you know it, they'll become Bitcoin experts and may know more than you do about Bitcoin. Now, today's guest is Will Cole from Zaprite. It's someone I consider a good friend. Will, thanks for joining us on the show. How is it down there in Austin today?
Oh, thanks, Gary. Thanks for having me. In Austin, it's great, beautiful fall day. Fall came early for us. A lot of traffic, but
there's always a lot of traffic. There's always a lot of traffic down there in Austin. Hey, before we
as you told me, it was they built a big city and then decided to build roads afterwards.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I always think. Whenever I drive down to Austin, by the time I get to Georgetown, which is like 30 miles away, I start hitting traffic, and I'm 30 miles from Austin. So yeah, that's a mess. Hey, give everybody a little bit of a short bio about who is Will Cole.
Sure, Gary. So I've been a Bitcoiner for a long time. First learned about Bitcoin in 2011. But more than anything, I've been sort of in the Bitcoin world as an investor and then as a product person or a product manager. So I started my career in software development in 2006 when I graduated college, focusing on software development, both as at the time as kind of a front end, engineer, although I was terrible at that, and then later as what a lot of people call a product manager, just meaning specifying products, writing out specs, doing designs, that sort of thing before we write code. And during that time, I was also an entrepreneur. I started a lot of businesses up in New York City, all of which that failed, and then ultimately joined a successful business started by a friend of mine called Stack Overflow that went on to a pretty large success as a software business. But during that whole time I was at Stack Overflow, I was interested in Bitcoin and decided after 7 years that I would actually work on Bitcoin, use my skills to contribute to the space. But yeah, me generally, I've been obsessed with Bitcoin for 12 years now, and spend most of my time working on software.
Well, being in Bitcoin for 12 years now, it's needless to say, you've seen a lot of changes and a lot of growth, in that amount of time. And I pulled this off, and I'm saying that because I pulled this off your Twitter page. On April 1st, 2013, you made a post or poll. Would you rather own a Bitcoin or 50 euros in a European bank? So I have to guess that Bitcoin was around $50 there, or 50 euros. But I find that to be a great poll that you're asking. Do you want 50 bucks or a Bitcoin? Which would you rather have? That shows where we've gone.
Yeah, I mean, it really does. I pinned that tweet for a couple of reasons. I remember why I tweeted that, actually, which is, it seems like almost like an April Fool's joke, but it wasn't. Bitcoin was 50 euros at the time. I think at the time that would have been $65, $70, something like that. And what had happened was there was a massive bail-in in Cyprus on that day, or maybe the day before. I learned about it on that day, where essentially what happened was Cyprus was in trouble, the government was in trouble, and they seized or claimed ownership over any amounts over $10,000 in a bank account. And so that was a tongue-in-cheek way of trying to point out Bitcoin's censorship resistance, or not censorship resistance, but unconfiscatability, right? Where a lot of people just had found out that their money in their bank didn't actually belong to them, because their counterparties, both in the banking system and in the government, had decided to claim ownership over those funds. So that was a fun day.
I'm familiar with that happening, but I didn't realize, or else I don't remember, that it was any amount over $10,000. I thought it was like 10% or something. They scalped off everybody's bank accounts. They took off 10%. I didn't know it was like, yeah, we're gonna take everything if you've got this much money.
Yeah, to be fair, I am not 100%. I'm not 100% sure on what exactly. I can't remember.
Well, I can't either.
11 years now at this point. Yeah, but I remember it was defined as a bail-in at the time instead of a bailout, where essentially the citizens of Cyprus were being conscripted into this bail-in strategy, where a certain amount of money that was in Cyprus bank accounts was going to be confiscated, or at least was earmarked to be confiscated. I should go back and look at that whole scenario over again. Wrong. But I remember feeling at the time that this was a huge validation point for Bitcoin back in 2013, where we hadn't seen many of them yet, right? And here we had a European country, a seemingly stable country, seizing everyday citizens' funds.
Yeah, well, that's a big deal, and some people are concerned that may happen here someday, since it's been happened somewhere before. Because even the money in the bank here is not yours. I mean, once you put it in there. I think another thing I found interesting is, and Parker Lewis, he's been on the show twice, told me this. You and Parker have known each other since kindergarten, and you're still best friends. I mean, that's a long time, dude. And you're business partners. I mean, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
Parker and I have known each other since we were 3 years old, actually. Yeah, pre-kindergarten.
Pre-kindergarten. That's a long time, dude. That's a long time to know anyone and be good friends with them and be able to work with them. So tell me, one more thing I saw here that I wanted to go over real quick on this was you have a site called The Tools of Ignorance. What is that?
Well, it's where I've begun writing about lots of different things, although I started with software development. When I transitioned into working in Bitcoin full time, I'm doing software development, but a lot of what I learned was in the fiat world, just doing things for companies like Stack Overflow. And I had a lot I kind of wanted to get off my chest before I started writing more publicly about Bitcoin. I've been rather slow in finishing my first series here, but I have my last post on this series on software development called The Invariance of Software Development coming up in the next week or two. And then I'll be moving on to topics more centrally focused on Bitcoin. But really for me, it was just that, outside of Bitcoin, I've had this, and it's affected my life in Bitcoin for sure. I've had this entire career around software development and product development that I wanted to get some of this off my chest and sort of describe how I work and how it's worked at scale for me. And the invariants are basically an argument that no matter what type of, call it software methodology one would use, that there are certain things that can't really escape doing in order to be a consistent product development team. And I broke that down into 5 invariants, of which 4 I have posted, the 5th coming soon. And, then I'll have that off my chest and we can talk more about Bitcoin.
Well, I'm going to definitely have to go check that out because I wasn't even aware of that site, I hate to say. But I guess because I need to start following you on Twitter, which I did, so that when you post them, I'll see things like this there for sure. So
there you go.
When we come back, we're getting ready to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about, I want to hear about your orange pill moment, how you got orange pilled. I'm going to have a question for you. I ask everybody, what is Bitcoin according to Will Cole? Well, I don't ask everybody what Bitcoin is according to Will Cole, but I'm going to ask you what Bitcoin is according to Will Cole.
That'd be a great question.
And because it's amazing. I get a lot of the same answers, but I get a lot of answers that are really different. I go, wow, I hadn't had that answer yet. So we're going to take a commercial break and we'll be right back after these words from our sponsor with more of Will Cole from Zaprite. And welcome back to the Bitcoin Boomer Show. I'm your host, Gary Leland. Here we talk about Bitcoin, and that's all we talk about, because that's all I care about. There's Bitcoin and maybe 20,000 cryptocurrencies. I don't care about the other 20,000. I just care about Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the only thing that matters when it comes to digital gold, digital money, whatever you want to call it. Today, we're talking to Will Cole from Zaprite. Will, welcome back to the show. Now here it is. I want to know, what is Bitcoin? Give us your definition. Take as much time as you need. Some people just say digital cash, and that's it. They're through. But what is Bitcoin to Will Cole?
Yeah, so I'll start with, I believe Bitcoin is money. And then specifically, I believe Bitcoin is money that is best utilized as currently a savings technology. So if I leave it at that, I think that's a little bit unsatisfying. So, believing that Bitcoin is money was actually a fairly long process for me, right? Bitcoin looked interesting as a possible medium of exchange when I first learned about it. It looked like it could have certain use cases that dollars or euros or in-game gold couldn't have. This is back in 2012 or so. But over time, I came to appreciate Bitcoin as just money and potentially the best money, and then potentially the best global reserve currency overall. And I believe that once you make up your mind that Bitcoin is money, that, what it becomes to you is a little bit more than just saying, like, oh yeah, US dollars are money or euros are money, is that you learn about Bitcoin's core attributes, and it is money that does what, right? Well, it is money that protects you from counterparties, right? Bitcoin's decentralized nature and the lack of a necessity of trusted third parties means that you can reduce counterparty risk. We talked about Cyprus before, right? The reason that the Cyprus bail-in was possible is because of the government and the banking system, both counterparties to you when you deposit money in a bank in Cyprus. That is your counterparty risk, that one of those two counterparties could betray you in some way, right? And that with Bitcoin, when you have your Bitcoin at rest, it is possible. It's not always what people choose to do, but it is possible to store your Bitcoin in a way with no counterparties. And so if Bitcoin is money and US dollars are money, which one has a better story for how you can store it at rest? Save it, not touch it, not transact with it. That's just one use case, but as a savings technology, or really just as a storage technology, Bitcoin, I learned, was superior to fiat currencies in terms of custodying it over the long term. And then as a savings technology, it was really over the years of 12, 13, 14, and into 15, where knowing that Bitcoin had a 21 million unit limit, right? But then really feeling that that limit was credible and unchangeable, right? And for that, I needed a lot of proof in the pudding, right? A lot of people can say, well, hey, this little thing's going to be scarce, this baseball card, and then they go print a bunch more baseball cards. Or they say, we're targeting 2% inflation with the US dollar, which makes it relatively scarce compared to other currencies. But then, they print, 80% of all dollars that have ever existed in a 4-year period, right? Those are incredible claims now. You cannot credibly say at any point in time that we're going to target and keep US dollars at a 2% inflation, because we know that they cannot keep that promise. So can Bitcoin keep the promise of the 21 million limit, which, if they could, would give it a story on top of sort of the custody thing that I mentioned earlier around being good for savings, like something like gold, which is credibly scarce on our planet. And really, it wasn't like a single moment, right, where Bitcoin was obvious to me that 21 million limit couldn't be changed. It was understanding what the consensus rules were, how the consensus rules could be changed. That's a really long topic in and of itself. But personally, I became convinced that the 21 million limit on Bitcoin could not be changed, would not be changed, and it was completely infeasible for that to ever change. So that covered, store of value, and that aspect of Bitcoin being money. And then over time, better tools get built for wallets, infrastructure, different custody solutions, that Bitcoin's really easy to spend and to send around to each other. That if you've ever had to send international transfers or wire money for any business purposes or individual purposes, or just be a business that accepts credit cards and then sees how the fee structure and payouts and all of that affect your day-to-day business, is that it became clear to me over time that Bitcoin would continue to grow as a medium of exchange as well as being a store of value. And so all those things put together, I came to the conclusion that Bitcoin was money, and Bitcoin is money, and that it had all of these attributes to it that made it superior money in many, many different ways.
How'd you actually find out about Bitcoin originally?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what my first moment of scouring old emails and stuff like that. Best I can tell, I heard about it first in April of 2011. That doesn't mean I was like buying it or took it particularly seriously at that time, but I don't think I was really aware of Bitcoin on any level other than hearing the word or something like that thrown out there. In April 2011, I was in New York City, and I was hanging around a bunch of people that had worked on Ron Paul's campaign. I believe they were now at that point working on Gary Johnson's presidential campaign, but they were ostensibly, Ron Paul people. And there were several people in that little group in New York that were pretty into Bitcoin already, on the mining side, all of that. I hadn't, I think I probably heard about it before, but I hadn't taken it seriously. And that group of people, along with my older brother, were the people that sort of opened my eyes to it.
Since we're on the subject of, I guess, orange pilling or whatever, your mother-in-law is Senator Loomis. Did you orange pill her, or did she find that out on her own, and then y'all had a mutual subject to talk about?
Yeah, I've been asked this a bunch. I did introduce her.
I guess it's an obvious question.
I'm always very quick to point out that. Is it? I introduced her to the idea of Bitcoin. I believe in 2013, but orange pilling is the wrong word with Cynthia because I think it took like 5 minutes. Normally when you orange pill someone, you're spending a lot of time with someone. You're covering all their anti-arguments with Senator Lummis. And she wasn't a senator at the time. It was very simple. Introduced it, talked about it for 5 minutes, and within 5 minutes, she seemed to get it implicitly, entirely, and just said, "Okay, let's start buying some." Right. And from there on out, like there was no convincing. She did her own research, so I can take credit for introducing the topic to her. But in terms of her understanding of it and what she's done, in the U.S. government, all credit to Cynthia. She is unbelievable in many ways.
Yeah, I don't think she just submitted a bill, I guess, to make Bitcoin a strategic asset and stockpile Bitcoin. Yeah. I was talking to someone the other day about that, and they were like, "Oh, that's a stupid idea." And then I was watching a show, something on YouTube about it. I think on the show it said that we stockpile $2 billion worth of cheese as a strategic asset. And I was like going,
absolutely.
We stockpile cheese as a strategic asset, but there are people against Bitcoin as a strategic asset? That makes no damn difference. It makes no sense. But we're going to take a break right now, a word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back after this word. And also, please share this show with your friends. Like I said earlier, helps us out, it helps them out. We don't have any Bitcoin we're going to sell you. We just want to teach you about Bitcoin. We'll be right back after this word from our sponsor. And welcome back to the Bitcoin Boomer Show. We're joined by Will Cole today from Zaprite. Will, welcome back to the show. Thank you for the information there on Senator Lummis. To know that you didn't really do a lot of orange pilling. You just mentioned it to her and told her real quick. That's got to be some quick orange pilling, 5 minutes. It took me a whole day. I mean, so she's a smart. She's a nice lady for sure, but she's evidently pretty smart too.
Yeah, I would say that, Cynthia had a really good background to understand Bitcoin quickly. She had been, a rancher. She had been an entrepreneur. She had been the state treasurer of Wyoming prior to any, federal, positions. And so it just kind of seems, sometimes you find like the programmer who's been thinking about decentralized systems or cryptography, or you find the finance person who has been disillusioned by the dollar, and sometimes it's the, Austrian economist. Cynthia just had some of the prerequisites where it didn't take much, for it to make sense really quickly.
One thing I do want to get into now is Zaprite. You and Parker Lewis. Is it just the two of you that have started that? I didn't know if there's anyone else involved, or is this y'all's baby?
No. So John McGill is actually the original founder of Zaprite. And John, Parker and I met him while he was working out of the Bitcoin Commons when Parker and I were at Unchained Capital, or Unchained now. And So we were aware of Zaprite as John was building it up. When Parker and I stepped aside from Unchained, we were just looking at lots of different ideas for new businesses that we could do in the Bitcoin space. I mean, no idea was off limits, and we just knew we wanted to work together. And of the several things we narrowed down that we could spend our time on, one of them was payments, because Parker was launching his Gradually Then Suddenly book, and we were trying out different options of how he was going to sell this thing, and none of them actually quite fit what he wanted to do. And then I had was going to be starting my Tools of Ignorance blog, and I was going to take donations there. And it was just kind of surprising to us because, we had a pretty simple set of what we wanted to do, which is we wanted a non-custodial solution. So, that took out things like BitPay and stuff like that, where Bitcoin went directly to a wallet of our choosing. So if I had a Cold Card already, or a Trezor, or anything, set up, that I could just point the invoice or point the checkout to my wallet that I already had. I'd already made some decisions in terms of where I was comfortable custodying my Bitcoin. Why couldn't Bitcoin just go straight to that wallet in an e-commerce case? And we looked around and we just really couldn't find anything that fit. I know there's BTC Pay Server, of which I'm a big fan. I know all of us at Zaprite are big fans, but that wasn't really the point. Like, we weren't looking to run a server or run infrastructure or that type of overhead. I just wanted the Bitcoin to go to my wallet. We couldn't find anything until we remembered John at Zaprite. And John had built a business invoicing product that he was a freelancer. He had been doing work at Bull Bitcoin. He was sending out invoices to clients. He wanted the option to be paid in Bitcoin in a non-custodial way. And so he had built, I remember my aha moment with Zaprite was looking at what he had built with that and seeing his connections page. And it was a bunch of different wallets you could hook in, and you could accept Bitcoin payments to any of those wallets for paying an invoice. We're like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what we want to build, only we want to do it in context other than just business invoicing. Maybe John wants to do that too. So Parker and I talked to John for several weeks and decided that, instead of, him just doing business invoicing and us running off and doing e-commerce and some other things, that we'd be better off together. And so, John McGill, great Bitcoiner, and he did a fabulous job building Zaprite even before Parker and I had joined.
Well, I have to say, I use Zaprite. I was using IBEX, which I was happy with IBEX as far as for receiving payments. But it did not have the feature to send invoices, which is fantastic for me, especially when it comes to sponsors. Because I'd send a sponsor and they go, I want to pay. Can you send me an invoice? And I'd send me an invoice and go, I want to pay in Bitcoin. So I said, well, I'll send it to this wallet address. Number one, it was a little more communication involved rather than just receiving an invoice and saying, pay in fiat, pay in Bitcoin. I mean, to me, it's a great product for that. And it came out at a really good time for me, seeing how IBEX had pulled out of the United States. And I needed a replacement. And then all of a sudden, ding, ding, ding. Oh, yeah, Parker and Will are doing Zaprite. Let me get in touch with them. Because I'd already set it up. I just had not done anything with it. So I've been very happy with a Zaprite. So as someone who's a user, and I guess maybe I use it more than many people since I'm running a whole BitBlock Boom conference with it. It is fantastic, I believe. So y'all should be very happy. Is it everything going how you expected, or you're ahead of progress, or where you thought you'd be? What's happening?
Yeah, so Zaprite's a really exciting company in a lot of ways. I mean, for a long time, I know there's always this discussion is Bitcoin ever going to make the leap into being a medium of exchange on a large scale basis, right? And I'm realistic in the sense that Bitcoin's not that right now. But in a lot of ways, I think that we're using sort of pre-Lightning Network and pre-Layer 2 biases against what we should be working towards for a future where, if you think Bitcoin is money, how do people use money? And ultimately, if Bitcoin is considered money, which I think is increasing in adoption, that mindset, that of course people are going to, use Bitcoin as money, as a medium of exchange. In terms of timing on that, it's just like, I don't think it's a chicken or egg type of proposition where it's like, well, how's it going to work? Are people going to demand to start paying in Bitcoin, or are people going to demand to start receiving in Bitcoin? I think it's very clear that people are not going to demand to pay in Bitcoin, but people are going to demand to be paid in Bitcoin. The fact that the number one way to obtain Bitcoin right now is through FX exchange, I think is unlikely to hold true over the long term. That for most people, they acquire money through selling their goods and services, their time, their talents, through work and entrepreneurship, and that will end up being the obvious way to obtain Bitcoin over time. So in terms of what's going on right now for us is we're just sort of slowly going through each type of transaction type that scratches our own itch and that we want to help facilitate on behalf of our customers, with the basic idea being you as a human being want more Bitcoin. And one of the ways you can do that is to accept Bitcoin as payment for yourself as a contractor, for your business on a primary basis. And so we've built e-commerce tools, integrations with sites like WooCommerce, payment links where you can send off one-off SKUs to be paid in Bitcoin, business invoicing, and very recently, a very simple POS, point of sale system where you can in person accept Bitcoin really simply. And what really differentiates Zaprite from other places where you can do this already is that it's very likely you can take your existing wallet that you're already using and plug that in, and Bitcoin will go directly to that. You can do it with a hardware wallet. You can do it with a custodial account like Strike. You could do it with a non-custodial, but collaborative custody thing like Unchained. You can hook these wallets up and accept Bitcoin directly to a custody solution that you're already familiar with. And then lastly, what we do that I think is a little bit different is that we put the option to pay with Bitcoin with the option to pay with fiat, if you prefer to do that. We're realists that, businesses have obligations and expenses in dollars. They need to also accept dollars. So we integrate with the likes of Stripe or Square or PayPal and Venmo so that you can accept payments in both. And then you can play all the games you want. You can charge a premium on the fiat if you're trying to prioritize receiving Bitcoin, or reverse that and make it a discount for Bitcoin instead of a premium for fiat. There's all sorts of things you can do there then to incentivize the type of payments that you want to receive.
Well, there's a lot more I want to go over with Zaprite, but we're going to take a break right now for a word from our sponsor. And when we get through with that, we'll be back with Will Cole from Zaprite. Talk a little bit more about that. See you in a minute. Awesome. And welcome back to the show. We're here to talk about Bitcoin. That's all we ever talk about. If you watch this show on a regular basis, you know that. And today we have Will Cole from Zaprite, explaining Zaprite and talking Bitcoin. Welcome back to the show, Will.
Thanks, Gary.
Now, one question I have is, and I don't understand what happened. This isn't necessarily Zaprite, but I'm just wondering how this may pertain to Zaprite in the future. As I said earlier, I was using IBEX for my payments, and they completely pulled out of the U.S. due to regulatory rulings, I guess. Do y'all have any concern about that over the long haul, or is there anything you're doing differently than they were doing that makes you not as concerned about that?
Sure. Well, we're always looking out for, we're a compliant company in the United States. Will always be a compliant company in the United States. There's some big differences between us and IBEX. The main issue with IBEX was the question of money transmission and the need to obtain money transmission licenses. So a lot of companies, particularly ones that actually do custody on behalf and then facilitate transactions on top of actually taking control and custody of funds. They have to go out and get these licenses. In the United States, that's state to state. So, companies like Coinbase, big exchanges, all the way down to Unchained, will go obtain these licenses so they can do businesses in those states. IBEX, I don't believe, had any or maybe very few of those money licenses. And so there became a point where that became like an unviable strategy because, they operate very similarly to the way, say, some fiat companies would operate, which is when you receive Bitcoin, it goes to their wallet. They have custody over the funds and then they pay you out. At least that's my understanding of how they work.
You're correct.
For Zaprite, it's very, very different model. Remember,
well, I was going to say every day at around, I don't know, a certain time of the day, 6 o'clock, midnight, whatever, you'd get a payment from them for if you made 3 sales a day in Bitcoin, you got a payment for those 3. So it definitely went to their wallet and then to yours.
Yeah, and that's pretty classic money transmission is when you take custody and then you facilitate payments out, then you would be a money transmitter. In Zaprite's case, we can't pay you out because we never have custody over funds ever. It's kind of a bring your own wallet experience. You have a Bitcoin wallet that you like and that you're comfortable with, and then you make a connection with Zaprite, and then whatever reason you're using Zaprite for, whether it be business invoicing or a WooCommerce store, or you're setting up payment links or doing a point of sale, those funds go directly to you. So we can't intermediate in any way between you and your money. Now, if you choose a custodial account, like say a Strike, then funds will go to Strike, and of course you would have to withdraw or spend from there. But Strike has money transmitter licenses all over the place. So Zaprite is helping facilitate payments, but we're not strictly a payment processor in sort of the traditional mode where we don't take control over funds. We can't pay you out because we don't touch any money ever. I actually think that this is kind of the Bitcoin native way of doing payments, which is, I like these sort of in-between businesses, I call them, where, at Unchained, we did this in-between business where on one extreme, Coinbase was holding all of your money. And on another extreme, you were, had your own hardware wallets running open source software, which could be kind of scary, especially inheritance and things like that. And then Unchained found this like unique trade-off level where you were sovereign, you lost privacy, but you were sovereign over your funds, which was, I thought, a very Bitcoin native way to do things. Zaprite is similar, where on one extreme you have like the BitPays of the world or the IBEXs where where they take custody and they pay you out. On the other extreme, you might have something like BTC Pay Server, where you have to run the infrastructure and the server infrastructure in order to take payments. We kind of find this middle ground where it's like, well, we won't touch any of the money. Yes, you have another counterparty in terms of privacy, right? We do see transactions and provide reporting and things like that. But a lot of people see that as a benefit because it helps them with their accounting for their businesses and things like that.
Well, actually, also with the way that you guys do it, sending it to my wallet, it seems like to me it's cheaper than using someone else, because someone else is going to charge you a percentage. And if you're a high volume company doing business in Bitcoin, I mean, don't y'all just charge like a monthly fee or something?
Yeah, currently we're charging just a monthly fee. We sell it like SaaS software. I want to be very clear that's not the only way we'll monetize in the future. Like, we will do transaction fees in the future, but because we're not custodians, it allows us to have much lower fees than traditional fiat partners, right? So a traditional fiat partner processing credit cards, right, is going to take some sort of fixed fee amount per transaction plus a transaction fee. And you might think that you're getting really ripped off in that world. A lot of people feel I feel that way when I see those fees. However, it's a hyper competitive market, whether you're talking about the credit card world or you're talking about the payment processor world, between Square. These are commoditized businesses. These are bottom of the barrel pricing in order to run these operations, right? So I have to assume, given the competitive nature of those markets, that it's not easy to get a lot cheaper on those rails. But in the Bitcoin world, we don't have to run a lot of the infrastructure that they're running, right? Our overhead and costs can be far lower than in the traditional fiat world, so that there's still a cost to doing business, right? And there's still a service being provided and value being created, but we can do so at a much lower cost because of the Bitcoin network, the open source nature of the project, and the non-custodial option that we built.
Well, I like what you built, and I've enjoyed using what you've built. For sure. I do want to, so we don't run out of time, I want to make sure you tell everybody where they can find you, follow you, Zaprite, give us all the pertinent links.
Yeah, sure. First, go check out Zaprite, zaprite.com. You can do a free 30-day trial before you make any commitments. If you have a wallet in mind, or just want to explore what we're doing, check that out. You can follow me at Will Cole on Twitter. It's pretty much the only place I pay attention. I can't paste my InPub in here, but I'm on Nostr as well. And then I'm writing about software development and Bitcoin at thetoolsofignorance.xyz.
Very good. Now that I see we have 2.5 minutes here, I have a question for you.
Nice.
Why? And I've pondered with this for a while. A lot of people, I know that Parker is real big on charging more if you're paying fiat than he does for if you're paying for Bitcoin. But there are other places that really don't look at it that way. They just give you like a 20% discount for Bitcoin. I'm always confused on that. Why wouldn't the company just take the fiat and then with that 20% that they've got extra, buy Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I think that there's different ways to think about this. The first way is, what are you trying to incentivize as a merchant, right? If I want to be paid in Bitcoin, what's the best way to incentivize getting that Bitcoin, right? If I don't care what I'm going to be paid in, right, then maybe you don't do any discount or any premium. But I feel like the fiat premium is the best way to incentivize the Bitcoin payment, because you now are, while USD is your unit of account, right, your preferred method of payment is Bitcoin, and you're basically punishing people who don't, who don't pay in Bitcoin. And I feel like that sense of loss of paying with fiat would overcome many of the customers in that case. But also, you have to allow for the discount side of things, because if you're doing a business invoice, for instance, and you agreed to, say, a $5,000 piece of work that you were going to do, you can't very well then show an invoice that says like, well, but if you pay me in dollars, it's $5,200. You can't do a premium there. So then you can show your preference by just saying, there's a discount on the Bitcoin. Also, I think that people would want to accept Bitcoin rather than taking the fiat and converting it, because ultimately it would be much cheaper, right? There are large spreads and fees associated with, FX transactions around, going to an exchange and buying Bitcoin. And that actually the most, cost-effective way of earning Bitcoin is not, sell something in fiat, take all the fee hits on fiat and all the taxes and everything, then go to an exchange and buy Bitcoin and pay all the fees and the spreads and everything on that. It's just to take it on a primary basis. Ends up being much cleaner, much faster, much cheaper.
Well, I have to admit, I do like being paid in Bitcoin. I do have to admit that.
Yeah.
Every time I see the invoice come through and it's paid in Bitcoin, a little smile comes to my face. But someone like me who's never sold any Bitcoin, after a few years, that really helps out. Hey, Will, we got about 15 seconds left, so I'm going to end it. Thank you for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Gary, thank you too, man. Good to see you.
Have a good day. Okay, we'll be right back after this word from our sponsor. And welcome back to the Bitcoin Boomer Show. I hope you've enjoyed today's show with Will Cole. It was nice hearing about Bitcoin in 2013. I wish I was into Bitcoin back then and was getting Bitcoin at $60, $70. That'd be exciting. And hearing about Zaprite. Stephanie, my great producer here, what did you think of the show? Did you have any questions or input you wanted to add? Info from the Peanut Gallery there?
I think Zaprite sounded like a really useful tool for businesses. But now my question to you is your connection. Like, you knew Senator Lummis was his mother-in-law, I think you said.
Yes.
And what's the story there? Because that's really cool that she's...
When we wrote the book, Bitcoin and the American Dream, we wrote that book, Annalise, which is Will's wife.
Okay.
Well, that's Senator Lummis's daughter.
Yeah.
So it took us a week to write that book, so I got to know her pretty good. And then when we did the book opening or the book release, we all went up to D.C., and she held an event for us and had staffers there from other senators for our book release. And then actually even We went over to her condo to sign copies of the books. I think we signed like 1,000 copies of the book, all 7 of us. And then she even gave us a tour of the Capitol during COVID, so there was no one in the building. It was the best tour of the Capitol you could ever have. Nobody was in there except for us, basically, and a few staffers. So I kind of got to know her pretty good spending a day with her. But speaking of Bitcoin and the American Dream, please check out my book, Bitcoin and the American Dream, at bitblockboom.com/books. I also want to make sure you know about the conference I hold every year in April in Dallas, Texas. Check out BitBlockBoom at bitblockboom.com. This is the 8th year coming up in April for BitBlockBoom, making us the world's oldest and longest running Bitcoin conference. So if you're anywhere, please check out BitBlockBoom. And this isn't just for Dallas. I have people come from Australia, from the Netherlands, from all over the world. So do check out BitBlockBoom. I also want to make sure you know to follow me on Twitter. My handle is Gary Leland. It makes me pretty easy to find. I'm pretty much Gary Leland everywhere. So check out my Twitter account. And one more thing I want to make sure you know about is my monthly meetup at meetup.com/bitblockboom. We usually have a barbecue once a month in Dallas, Texas. Great barbecue. So do check out meetup.com/bitblockboom and hang out with a bunch of Bitcoiners and eat barbecue. That's it for today's show. I will see you next week. But remember, please share this show with your friends. You're doing them a favor by helping them learn about Bitcoin. Because like I said, I'm not selling Bitcoin. I'm just giving away information. Until next week, remember to stack those sats. See you later.